Welcome to the Hustle, Grind, Shine, and Reignite podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Hartley. Join me on another journey with amazing and talented professionals of color. Laugh and cry and take notes, but most of all, be inspired. All of this and more on our next episode of Hustle, Grind, Shine, and Reignite. Let's go. Hello and welcome to another episode of Hustle, Grind, Shine, and Reignite. I'm your host, Jessica Hartley, and I am so excited to bring you our next episode with our next guest. Our next guest is Dr. Natasha Jones. She is the Associate Professor of Technical Communication at Michigan State University. She's also a speaker and a writer and an author and just an all-around awesome and amazing Black woman. She is also, as we talked about in our prep call, literally one of my oldest friends. We met in sixth grade at Davidson Fine Arts School in Augusta, Georgia. Shout out to the AUG and all my Southern brethren and sisterin and non-binary siblings out there. And so I'm just excited to talk to her and bring her story and her journey to you. Welcome, Dr. Jones.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited, and I'm super excited to share this space and time with you.
Oh, that's great. Well, I know you have such an incredible journey to share. One of the missions of this podcast is to feature women and amazing people across different industries. So a lot we're going to talk about today is this world of academia. But before we get there, let's talk about little Natasha Jones. Before she was Dr. Jones, before you were Mama Jones, you were little Tasha Jones. So talk to me about your childhood and growing up. And obviously I know your parents, you knew my parents, but talk to me about what it was like to grow up and what your childhood was like and what did you want to be at that point in time, sort of growing up? Let's start there.
Yeah, so my childhood, I think, was pretty uneventful as it goes. I'm the oldest of three sisters, so there are three of us. I'm the oldest. I was raised in a two-parent household. My mom was a registered nurse and my dad was a postal clerk. And they were really serious and made it a point that education was something that was expected of us, something that they wanted us to take full advantage of, full opportunities of, which is how I actually ended up meeting you because my parents pushed me to audition for, I think at the time they're called magnet schools, but Davidson Fine Arts School, you had to audition and take a test and then be accepted into it. And it was one of the best schools. And I think probably still one of the best schools in Augusta, Georgia. And so that was really a pivotal point for me because at the time, I had all these ideas about what I wanted to do, what I wanted to be. I want to be a lawyer, want to be a writer, all of these kinds of things. And my parents made very clear that the way to that was through education. And they were always very serious about grades, always very serious about making sure we were studying and those kinds of things. Those were some things that worked for me, but other things that didn't, because as you know, I'm a very sociable person. And so education was not only my only focus to go to school, like I needed to talk, I needed to make friends.
Get in trouble for all that talking.
Right? I took dance for the longest and I was not good at dance at all, but I was committed to it. And just all of these other things that kind of took my attention. I also really appreciated later on, I'll say, not immediately when I started at Davidson, but I appreciated the ways that I was able to engage different parts of myself. And I wish looking back, I'd taken more advantage of like being more serious about this fine art or that fine art or whatever. But I think that those things kind of lingered with me, like an appreciation for the arts, an appreciation for like going to see a ballet or going to hear a jazz band or going to hear,
Yeah.
a symphony. And I think that those kinds of opportunities were not typical for young Black girls in Augusta, Georgia, which is
Yeah.
highly segregated still to this day city. And there are clear disparities between races, especially, when we think about like what was going on in the early 90s, right? With like, mass
Yeah.
incarceration, war on drugs, those kinds of things. But even now, though some of those things are persistent. But I was given the opportunity to engage in some of those things as a young Black girl. And I
Yeah.
think if I had known then, I would have taken more advantage because I was not aware that
Yeah.
those opportunities were not readily available to everyone. So most of my childhood was pretty uneventful. I think I had a lot of opportunities that other folks didn't have. And I think those opportunities have definitely shaped me as I've gone off to, pursue higher education and even raise my own daughter. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So you're getting ready to graduate, Davidson. Had this great, middle school and high school, sort of a mixture of arts and very much still focused on academics.
yeah.
Davidson was as much as serious about academics as they were about the arts. And so you said, okay, I'm going to school. How did you make this decision of where you were going to ultimately go and what you ultimately decided to major
Right. Here's the interesting thing. Even though my parents were really, serious about education and making sure that we understood the value of an education, my parents didn't have a clear understanding of education beyond high school and what it means to go away to college,
in?
what it means to apply for colleges, what it means to apply for scholarship, what student loans mean. And I think a lot of Black families at that time who were watching things like A Different World, Cosby Show, those kinds of things, had this understanding of the importance of education, but we were not, or our parents were not given the tools to understand what
Mm,
higher education
mm,
meant. Most of their families, their parents didn't get past high school, if that. Our parents, sometimes they were getting past trade school, sometimes they were taking courses at night, like my mom did, but going away to college, living in a dorm, learning how to apply for scholarships and financial aid,
yeah,
that was not something that was readily understood. And so while my parents were like, you go to college, I did not have a lot of preparation as far as
yeah.
what does that mean? What does it mean to apply for college? I remember my parents being kind of shell shocked at the cost for applications
The
alone, like
price,
submitting the
just
applications. I think at the
yes.
time there was the Hope Grant, where if you went to certain schools in Georgia, you were able to get your tuition paid for or a portion of your tuition paid for. But what does that mean when you still have to pay for dorms, for books, to travel up there? Like, so all of these things that were not very understood. And I remember my heart originally was set on going to Spelman. And there was just no
Mm,
way that I could make Spelman work financially. When I decided, okay, I need to figure school out, I think that what happened was I ended up applying to a handful of schools like Georgia State, I think
mm,
Mercer, I think UGA, the
mhm.
public schools where I could try to, draw on the Hope Grant. And they ended up selecting one that made the most financial sense for my parents, which ended up being Georgia State University. And I don't regret that at all, but it just goes to show like this whole now this discussion about like student loan debt and how it overwhelmingly burdens Black women, and most of them
Yeah,
are around our age or even younger. Like this was purposefully set this way where there
yeah,
was this constant trying to progress and move up and upward mobility, and then the argument that education is the way, and this purposeful kind of occlusion and obfuscation and just opaqueness around that what it meant
yeah,
to actually do those things. So I ended up
yeah.
taking out loans. I ended up taking out loans that I would have to pay back, and I'm still like struggling with
Me
to
too.
just
We're in our
live,
40s
right?
and still taking care of it.
Still
Yeah,
taking care of it.
yeah.
Yeah. And so that's how I ended up at Georgia State and actually started my academic career, which I didn't know that's what it was going to be at the time. And
What did you think it was going to be? What do you think you remember thinking it was going to
I
be?
think you know this. I thought I was going to be like a magazine editor
Mm,
because at first I wanted to do law, and then I realized that law did not really give me a chance. You know, I'm a writer. I've always been a writer. I've
yeah.
always loved
Creative
words,
writing, poetry, and
creative
short
writing,
stories.
poetry,
And
all of this. And so when I got to college, I actually met, her name was Dr. Shirlene Holmes, and she was in the communications department. And she introduced me to Sweet Honey in the Rock and Intozaki Shange and all of that. And I'm like, okay, I want to be a writer. I don't want to be a lawyer, which my parents did not take very well. But also, I don't think they really understood that college is where you go and you find out what you really want to be, like what you really
figure it
want to be, what
out.
you're
Yeah.
passionate about. And I remember my dad saying something to the effect, well, you let these folks change your mind about being a lawyer, you let them convince you. And looking back, I didn't have the language to speak back to that. Like, no, I did what you do when you go to college. But if you have a generation before you that's never had that experience, it looks very different to them. So
Yeah.
I realized pretty quickly on that my love was really with language, was with the written word, poetry,
Mm.
was with magazine articles, newspaper, like anything written or anything I could engage. And so I really thought I was going to be this big time magazine editor. And I actually was a major in English at first and then changed that to print journalism, minor in English. And that worked out for me. I got to do some writing, some internships, some non paid internships, some engagement with.
There's a whole episode by itself on non-paid internships, especially in the 90s and early 2000s, where people were basically pimping the labor.
Exploitative.
In a lot of cases,
Absolutely. Yeah.
kids of color who I tell people, yeah, I had non-paid internships, which meant that I had a side job
Yep.
to pay. I needed to just gas, even if I was staying at home.
Yes.
I needed gas money and lunch money. So
Yes.
you had to work while you did those internships,
Right.
trust fund babies. No.
No, you don't have to do that, right? Or people who
Yeah.
understand higher ed and have their foot in the door, you don't have to do that too, that kind of thing. But so I
Yeah.
actually ended up graduating within 4 years, graduated cum laude, which I was super excited
Mm,
about. And I remember my parents being
mm.
disappointed I didn't graduate with higher honors. And I'm like, what the, we were not going to go. No, we're not.
Oh, Mr. and Mrs. Jones.
Listen,
Oh, they were such a delight growing
listen.
up.
But I landed my dream job, and I won't mention the name of the magazine, but I landed a job at an Atlanta magazine as an editorial assistant. And about, 2 months in or so, found out that I was pregnant. I didn't know the way the world worked. Right. And so thinking that I'm being upfront and honest, I told the job that
Oh,
I was pregnant and they unceremoniously let me go. Which, I still keep in mind. I'm like, every time I see that magazine, I'm like, yo, it's fine because I landed on my feet. But
yeah.
that was a learning experience for me that even
Yeah.
though people seem to have your best interest at heart, that's not necessarily true. And so I
Yes.
had my dream job as an editorial assistant at a magazine. I thought I was on my way up, found out I was pregnant, and then had the rug kind of ripped out from under me, which mean that I was also then struggling because I had an apartment, I had a car, I was a young woman in Atlanta, and I just had to like pivot really quickly because it became evident quite early on that I was going to be doing this on my own, which actually I'm thankful for
Right.
now. It took me a long way to get to like, what do they say? Thank God I didn't get what I asked for, that kind of thing. But like,
God gave you exactly what you
I gave
needed, not what
exactly
you
what I
asked
needed,
for.
right?
Yes.
And so I had to pivot really quickly. And there was a time where, it was my daughter and me. I had to rely on food stamps. I had to rely on friends and scramble to get on my feet. But I'm thankful
Yeah.
for those because I think those made me stronger. I think it made me stronger not only for myself, but for my daughter. And I think my daughter saw the work I was putting in. And she
Mm.
saw me, and we talked about this a little bit, as a whole human, not just mom, but like mom who's doing well here, or mom who's struggling here, or mom who had a hard day, or mom who's frustrated about this and
Yeah.
that. And so
Yeah.
I think that that has impacted our relationship positively, even though it was a hard time and,
Hmm.
difficult time to be a single mom and to try to figure out what am I going to do with this baby now that I'm all alone. So,
Right. And also the stigma
oh yeah,
back then, right?
yeah.
Because Ania's how old now?
She's 19 now. She's my
Ooh, yeah.
ride or
So almost
die.
20
She's
years ago,
fabulous.
this,
But yeah, the stigma, and especially my family are uber religious, just way religious. I can't even, the kind of.
it's a whole nother episode.
And then for me, having come from a two-parent household, and then
Yeah.
feeling like that was expected of me, like I need to make this work because this is, what's expected of me, and not understanding that families look different. They come in different sizes, they come in
Hmm.
shapes, they come with single moms, they
Hmm.
come with single dads, they come with two moms, two dads, whatever. And so I did not have that language to understand that I needed to make my family work the best way that I could. And it didn't
Mm.
have to look like my parents' marriage. It didn't have to look like in any other relationship. I needed to decide what was best for Natasha and Ania. And it took me a while to figure that out. But I feel like once I figured it out, I was able to
Yeah.
course correct and move in that upward direction that I had set out for myself since I graduated from Davidson. So, yeah.
Yeah. So you, oh, I mean, you're talking about being let go from the magazine, as we talk about parents and legacy and lineage is so critical, I think, because I came from educated parents as
Mhm.
well and, working professionals, but it wasn't corporate America
Yeah.
and it was just different, And so like, there's just exposure to things and concepts that we didn't know. And so, yeah, you walked in and were like, hey, I want to be transparent. I got a little bambino on the way.
Right.
And they're like,
They were like, "No,
no,
thank
bye.
you."
Uh,
And Georgia, and
no, thank
things that
you.
we don't know, like Georgia being an at-will state and all of these kinds of things, and
Mm,
not being able to take any legal repercussions because of, like, understanding the whole network of what corporate America looks like. I had no understanding of that. And at
yeah.
the time
Yeah.
when I was pregnant out of wedlock, which was like pregnant out of wedlock, back then, I also felt like in certain ways I could not ask my parents for advice because they were, you know,
Mm,
they came from the pregnancy out of wedlock is not the thing that's supposed to happen. Like it's not okay with it. There was, so, and even though they ended up being supportive, it's like there was this barrier for me to be able to actually communicate about the things that I was struggling with as a single mom. Like my parents
yeah.
don't know what it's like to be a single parent. And as much as they will empathize and like to think that they understand theoretically, they don't understand what it's like to
Hmm.
be you and your child day after day,
And
night
that's
after
it.
night,
Yeah.
whether you're
Yeah.
close to them
Yeah.
or whether you're on the other side of the country like I was in Washington state. Like they won't, and it's not any a dig at them, but they will not be able to understand the concept of what it means to be a parent in that kind of circumstance.
Yeah.
So
So, how did you bounce back from that? I mean, that's hard. It's a hard, feeling alone, having to create your own village and support system, having to rely on ways and things and means that are just hard and do things that you've never had to do before.
yeah.
How did you bounce back from that and make a pivot and sort of reignite what you needed to move forward?
I think reflectively looking back and thinking about,
Mm.
and you know this about me, I am not shy about my feelings. I'm a bulldog. I'm stubborn. If you tell me I can't do something, listen, hold my drink, listen, hold my mimosa, let me show you, right? And so
Yeah.
I've never been one to shy away from those kinds of challenges. Like some other challenges, yeah, but not those kinds of challenges because at my core, I think that this is something that maybe I developed over time, because I don't ever remember like being super confident in high school or super confident in college or whatever. But over time, after are successful at graduating from a really good high school, or you're successful at completing college with honors, or you're successful at landing your dream job, you start to build up confidence in yourself. And
Yeah.
as much as other folks would say, they believe in me or whatever, I had to build confidence in myself. And so I just got to this point where over time I was like, I can do this, right? And I
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
need to plan. I need to prepare. And I'll share this. I have generalized anxiety disorder. I'm a very anxious person, a therapist that's working with me and all the good stuff. But as I articulate to her at one point, my anxiety allowed me
Mm.
to get stuff done, like get it done.
Mm.
Because in my head, I'm already going to worst case scenario. And I'm like, okay, if this happens, then I need to do this, this, and this. If I can't pick my daughter up from school, I'm going to have to ask this, this, and this. If I can't, I'm going to have to leave class early and do this and jump on the highway. So, like, in my head, I got like a plan A and a plan B. And I'm like, I know that's like anxiety working on me, but I was like, you're not going to really surprise me because I've already thought about worst case scenario. Right. And so I
Mm.
think that
Mhm.
in a way, that anxiety drove me to get to plan, to get stuff done, and to keep at it. Like even when I had setbacks,
Mm.
just keep at it, keep at it, keep at it until I could
Yeah.
move forward. And then after Ania came along, for me, it was not an option to fail. Failure was not an option.
No.
Like I needed a
Mm.
job. I needed a good job that paid this much money. If I was going to go to school, I needed to be able to take care of her and go to school and get my, education. If I was going to move to Washington State like I did, I needed to figure out where am I going to live? What's my day going to look like? Where's my daughter going to go to school? So I feel like after Ania came along, paired with that anxiety, it was like failure is not an option. This is your
Yeah.
child, your responsibility. You make it happen. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I don't know if there was
Yeah.
like an actual moment where I'm like, I got to pivot and do better. I think it was just kind of a progression of things over time that
Yeah.
created space in my head.
Talk to me about how you navigated going to Auburn and then to Washington, as you've referenced a couple of times. And then you went to New Mexico.
Yes.
And then you went to Florida.
Yes.
And then you
All of
went to
it.
where you are
Yes.
now, Michigan. So, I mean,
Yes.
I want to hear about that journey and how you made the decision, or if sometimes the decision was kind of made for you
Mhm.
to navigate from one role to another while also being a single mom, while also you went and got more degrees. Because, hello, one degree is not enough.
Right.
You are Dr. Jones. So, talk to me a little bit about that journey from Auburn to Washington to the other places and how you navigated the balance of making the decisions
Yeah.
because your decisions were not just impacting you, they were also impacting Ania as well.
Absolutely. Well, after I had Ania, I did a little stint in corporate America. I did like customer service. I worked at the mall at one time. I did like collection, those kinds of things. And there's a part of me that was never really fulfilled with those positions because, like I said, my heart is in the written word. My heart is in writing. My heart is in that kind of thing. And my sister Shalonda, who was really pivotal with getting me to go back to grad school because she's like, hey, she was in grad school at the time. She's like, hey, there's this program at Auburn, it's technical communication. It sounds like it has these writing components. It's in the English department. It sounds like something you might be interested in. And I just kind of stepped back and did an assessment, like a real quick assessment. And I was at a job where I was making pretty good money. I had an apartment for myself and my daughter. I had a car. I was not far from family. And I was like, I could stay here and be okay.
Mm.
Like, I could really just stay here and be okay. But I felt like I would never feel like I actually tried to be what I want it to be. Like, I wanted to be a writer of some sort. I wanted to engage. And so when Shalana told me that, I was like, okay, I'm going to take a leap of faith and apply. And if I need to take out a loan or whatever, do what I need to do. And so I applied. I got in at Auburn. I learned what technical communication was because it was not what I thought it was. It's very different. I thought, okay, we were just writing instruction manuals. Like, no, you're not writing instruction manuals. You're thinking carefully about how any kind of complex information is explained to various audiences. So you're really doing like this careful audience analysis, you know, human centered kind of analysis. What does this group need from this communication, whether it be a digital communication, a printed communication, an audio, whatever. And so it just kind of opened the world for me about what technical communication was. And once I got in the
Wow.
classroom and was able to do like a graduate teaching assistantship and have my own class and, you know, design my own lesson plans, I was like, this is it. This is it. I love the classroom experience. I love the research. I love that I was continually learning. And it wasn't the type of writing that I envisioned myself doing ever. It was
Right,
research writing
right.
and it was engaging in it, but it was fascinating to me. And it gave me an outlet to actually be able to do writing while learning, while also
Mhm.
engaging this side of me that I did not know was there, which was the educator side of me that I never knew was there.
Yeah.
And so from there, I had really great mentors. And I was thinking, okay, I'll just go into industry because technical communicators can make a good amount of money. And she says, my mentor says, no, you are an educator, you are a scholar, you are applying
Mm.
for doctoral programs. And she sat down with me and she says, which doctoral programs interest you? So I'm like, okay, these are the ones that interest me. I applied. I got into two of the three, and I chose my top, you know, school, which was University of Washington, in there at the time technical communication department. And there was another school that offered me a position as a doctoral student that was closer to home. That would have been the logical choice, I guess, as a single mom. But
Mhm.
again, I was like, if I don't take this top choice, if I don't go with the University of Washington, I'm always going to regret it. And it's scary. And I don't know anything about the West Coast. I don't know anything about the Northwest. I'm a Southerner. I'm a Georgia girl. I don't have any family there. I
Mm.
don't have any friends there. But I was just like,
Mhm.
I gotta go. And so I remember they actually flew me out to like visit the campus and stuff and all of that. And I just kind of made my decision that I'm just not going to let fear hold me back. And I was scared. Let me not mince words. I was terrified
Mm.
to go that
Mm.
far without family with my daughter
Mhm.
and figure it out. But
Mhm.
I'm glad I did because I feel like University of Washington set me up for a fabulous career. They gave me a good foundation and a great start for a career in academia. And I'm so
Mhm.
thankful that I took that leap. And from there, I guess the other subsequent moves, New Mexico and Florida was, you know, I got my first job as an assistant professor in New Mexico. I mean, I didn't know anybody there, but hey, I'd already been down.
I mean, you're trying to hit four corners of
I
the
did.
United
Look, let
States.
me try this, a little that. But each time I moved, like from New Mexico, then to Florida, then Michigan, in my head, I'm making these moves strategically. I'm getting more money. I'm being able
Yeah.
to negotiate course loads. I'm being able to do the research I want to do. So every time I moved, you know, I'm like, this is a step up. This is a step up. This is getting me
Yeah.
closer and closer to where I want to be until, you know, I ended up here in 2019.
No, it's great. I love the part around taking a leap because I think it's just in our language now to use that word to talk about, making decisions in spite of fear,
Yeah.
despite of fear. It is there. We acknowledge it. We recognize it. We do all the things we can, the planning, the pros and cons to
Yes.
make sure we at least feel as if of all the things that we know, we are making the most informed decision as possible, but we're not letting that hold us back. And
Right.
so I appreciate that so much. I want to talk a little bit about the very sticky topic of what it means to be a Black
Ooh,
woman in higher education.
let me tell you.
Like, whew, you gotta take a couple breaths of that, right? Because,
Yes.
obviously in the last just few years, I think probably because of the pandemic and people have less time to spend out and they're spending it in, and just seeing like some of the hashtags in the last couple of years that went like viral like wildfire about what it meant to be Black in academia, women in
Mhm.
academia, women of color, men of color,
Mhm.
and navigating these still predominantly white institutions. It's not corporate America, but oh my goodness,
Mhm.
the parallels and similarities of these racist infrastructures.
Right.
I mean, we're not even going to get into like how some of these organizations got built on the backs of slaves,
Or legally.
and so
Yeah.
you can't say that that stuff doesn't
Right.
permeate, so talk to me about how it's felt and been and how you've navigated, and did you find a network of other women as you've been on this journey that have been supporting? I say women, could be men as well, or
Yeah.
non-binary individuals, but how's it been and how do you navigate
Well, I think that originally you go into academia at least for me, as being told that it's this bastion of liberalness, right? Like this progressive space that you're not going to find in corporate America, or you're not going to find in these other jobs. And really quickly you're disabused of that, myth. Academia is, in a lot of ways, neoliberal in the worst ways, necropolitics, capitalistic, exploitative, extractive. And the thing that I had to learn really quickly is academia does not love Black women. It just doesn't. And I doubt that it ever
that?
will. Of all of the institutions that I've been, you have these situations that happen. You get microaggressed, or people say this, or they bully, or whatever. And so you're never immune to that, despite your
Mm,
credentials. You're a PhD, you have your doctoral degree just like these other folks. You publish just like they do. You present just like they do. You teach classes just like they do. But you are still a Black woman in academia.
mm,
And if we're honest,
mm,
academia was never built for Black women, at least not academia that we, outside of HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, right? The predominantly white universities that we go into, for instance, the ones that I've been into since the start of my career, you have to really figure out ways to protect yourself and your energy, and while doing the work that fuels your passion and that you feel like makes a difference. And so
right.
my work is all around social justice and activism, and specifically looking, and it took me a while to make this pivot, but looking specifically at Black women and other marginalized genders and figuring out, like, okay, what does it mean for us to engage in academic spaces and places? And I have this question that I
Mm,
have on my desktop, and it's, what is tradition to the Black woman scholar? What does
ooh,
that look like in
ooh,
a PWI?
yeah,
And especially now, over the last couple of years, what does it look like in these PWIs that are very good at creating the facade of diversity, equity, inclusion? They're happy to put a statement up. They're happy to send out
yeah,
emails about Black Lives Matter. They're happy to talk about how they are, forward thinking and progressive. They're happy to create gender and equity organizations. They're happy to do all of those kinds of things except make real change, right? When we
yeah,
say, listen, this is going to take money out of your pocket. This is going to, ask you
yes,
to shift your finances this way. This is going to ask you to change what your administration looks like. This is going to ask you to tear down this academic program that you built the last decades, creating, and rethink it and reorganize it. This is going to ask you to go into neighborhoods that you think are, not worth your time, and think about ways
mm,
that you can learn from that community. Not that you can take learning to them, but that you can learn with that community. And this is going to
right,
ask you to rethink what academia actually means to society. Like, if we're just all talking to each other, what does that mean for the communities that we're around? What does it mean for the land that these PWIs are on? What does it mean for the
right,
communities that these PWIs depend on? And so I think for me, it's taken, I think I graduated 2012. It's 2022, right? It's 10 years. It's taken me a long time to stop expecting academia to make a space for me and for me to
Mm,
make the space for myself and be unapologetic that my academia does not look like your academia, or my work might
mhm.
not look like your work, or I'm going to say no to these committees and these commitments because that's not where my energy needs to give. And so it's taken a while for me to harness that resistance
Mhm.
inside of me.
Mhm.
And for a while, I was
Mhm.
super angry, especially, this past year, the year before that, super angry about just the things that I'm seeing in academia at not just this institution where I'm at, but beyond. And just realizing, I can't make huge changes, but activism also happens in very mundane ways, like me being able to support a
Yeah.
graduate student, or me saying, no, I'm not going to serve on your diversity committee so you can exploit me as a Black woman and then still not take
Yes.
my ideas up. Or no, we're not going to invite these students to study with us when they can't be supported as full human beings in a predominantly white institution. So I think I've come to that realization, and I've
Yeah.
started to make space that allows me to be able to sleep at night about that kind of academic I am. And one
Yeah.
scholar whose work has been influential, her name is Esther Ojito, and she talks about what it means to be a Black woman in academia. She has an article called Some of Us Die, Death and Decay in the Neoliberal Academy, or something like that.
Mm,
And she talks about her struggles as a Black woman who was mourning the loss of her parent. She's a first generation African immigrant, and the whole push of publish and perish and produce of academia, and how she created the space for her to be creative, to bring in,
mhm,
her grief, her sorrow, and use that as a way to be reflective and be whole with herself, like reflective
mm.
embodiment, and
Right.
what it meant for her to engage in academia in that way that folks are not used to. And so I just keep her piece in the forefront of my mind. And I'm like, I'm going to be the kind of academic I want to be.
Yeah.
And I can say that. And I want to say this really quickly. I can say that now. I have tenure. I'm a good institution. So, me taking that risk looks different from untenured,
Yeah.
precariously positioned Black women. But I hope that me saying that at least opens doorways, or opens an idea, or sparks some kind of inspiration in folks coming along behind me, or even folks ahead of me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I appreciate so much of what you just said. I mean, there's so much to unpack, but I think, just listening to your story and journey, and to your point around these institutions were never created for us. So all we can do is try to, make them as squishy and comfortable, acceptable as possible. It's interesting because we often use that word of like these organizations are happy to, and I'm like, well, in my head, I'm like, oh, they're not happy about it. They are obliged. They have to, right? Like they are obliged to do these things. And how do we carve out our own space and carve out who we are?
Yeah.
And I find myself and others that I've talked to as well, like that's what you have to do.
Hmm.
There's a little bit of like, how do I protect myself but still help others?
Yes.
And so I appreciate so much that, and also your reference of the article and the scholarship about how do you carve out and sort of find your own path
Yes.
that might look very different from your peers. So you've done a lot. You have multiple degrees, Dr. Jones. You have worked at numerous institutions. I know the life of an academic. My partner and spouse is a reformed academic, as I'll
Bless
say.
him.
I live that life and understand a lot of it. And you've been a single mom raising a beautiful, amazing, and just, I mean, it's just a delight and fresh air. But how do you take care of Tasha?
Right.
How do you take care of you? And how do you relax or restore? What does that look like for you?
So I've been trying to be more conscious of what it means to take care of myself and more just very purposeful in thinking about that because for so long, I'm going to be honest, my focus was not me. My focus is like my daughter. I would tell my friends, I'm like, they're like, when are you going to do this? When are you going to date? When are you going to do this? I'm like, no. I said, when Ania graduates and is in college, when Ania is always, and so for a long time, it was like when Ania is X, when Ania is this.
Mm.
And so 2020, my daughter graduates, the pandemic
Yeah.
hits. And I'm like, no, this is supposed to be mama time. Like, no, right? But
Yeah, a dream deferred.
right,
What happens to
I'm like,
his
this is wrong.
dream?
You just universe, spirits, gods, goddesses, ancestors, whoever, y'all wrong. I was just like, this is not okay. But so recently I found yoga. I love yoga.
Mm,
I'm not very good at it, but
yoga.
I love
It's
yoga.
okay. We don't have. It's not about being good, right? I
It's
mean, well,
not
you don't want to hurt
good at
yourself,
it.
so
And because of the
yeah.
pandemic, I do mostly like daily burn or something like that, right? So I love yoga. It just energizes me. It energizes me. I love the meditative portion of yoga when I can just like be one with my breath and so I really love yoga. And I've slacked off here lately, but I really love yoga.
Mm,
I like doing things like, listening to a podcast as I fall asleep. And that sounds like a weird thing for self care. But for me, it's just like I'll put on a podcast and I like podcasts that tell stories. And the story will
mm,
just drift me off to sleep or whatever. And then the last thing that I've been doing, which is fairly new, is I had to get back to my creative self because my love for writing
mm.
started with creative writing and poetry. And as
Yeah.
an academic, that gets shifted. You're writing all the time, but it's not creative. It's not for you. It's not engaging that creative side. And so I said, I need to do that. So I have gotten back to poetry. I set aside one evening a week to focus on my poetry. I'm taking a
I love
poetry
that.
class right now because I'm not a professionally trained
Yay.
poet, but I'm taking a poetry class. So I'm learning like poetic forms. I'm learning about non-Western forms of poetry, and I'm able to actually engage in that. And I feel like that helps me engage my scholarly side as well because I think about scholars like Audre Lorde, who was a
Mm,
poet and a scholar and just engaged
yeah.
in these, use creative and bell hooks. They're using their creative, they're using their educator lens, they're using their scholar lens. And so I find that engaging that creative side of me more seriously, like taking it seriously. Like I am going to write my poetry. I'm going to take this class. I'm going to read some poetry.
Yeah.
Has helped to
Yeah.
fuel me and sustain me. I guess the final thing is I say no. When I say no,
Wait, I'm sorry. Can you say that again? I need a say it again.
I say no, no, no,
Woo.
no. I used to be like, oh, sorry, I just can't. No. And being able to say no in different contexts, whether that means saying no to a committee, no to
Mm.
doing this extra thing, no to my parents, no, no, And
Yeah.
that has,
Yes.
you'll
Yes.
be surprised how much time you can recoup just by saying no. So I need to find a balance because I think I'm getting a little no happy, but I need to
I love it. No, no,
find
no, no,
no,
no, no.
no,
I love
thank
it. I
you.
think there was a TikTok or somewhere. I think it was a TikTok video that I saw. This is months ago, but it was like a woman showing you how to say no
Right.
in like different tones and inflections. But yeah, I agree with you. And it's hard. It's
It
hard
is.
sometimes to say no, even to things that you want to do that will be beneficial for you, that could be lucrative for you,
Right.
or give you a bigger platform. I definitely still struggle with wanting to do so much, and
Right.
there's just no capacity to do it all. I mean, how do you pace yourself?
The thing that I realize is like, I can't advise you to say no or Ania to say no or someone else to say no. I have to actually understand that everybody's context and localized situation is very different. And so it's really a reflective practice to say, should I say yes to this? Can I say no to this? And also understanding that just because you have the time on the calendar and you're technically available does not mean you have to be accessible. So, like,
Mm,
really understanding that saying no is about tuning in to yourself and your individual needs is really that's
yes.
the thing I'm trying to keep at the forefront of my mind.
Yes, there is power
Yeah.
in saying no.
Yeah.
Yes, I love it. Well, as we close, Dr. Jones, what advice do you have for other people of color,
Hmm.
particularly women of color, young women of color who are in school right now? They might be in undergrad or grad school. And what advice do you have for them? One, navigating these environments where you've navigated all the way from the bottom to not necessarily the top, but in a lot of cases, very high up.
Hmm.
And then also the advice of should they even pursue a career in academia? I mean, it's almost like being a teacher or being a nurse where it was exalted for so
Right.
long, especially among people of color, as this is a pinnacle. Oh my gosh, you
Right.
can do these things. And now there's, people leaving in drops and swills or
Right.
however. And how do they navigate
I
now?
think
What's your advice?
my advice is find your mentors, find those folks that you can depend on. And not only mentors in singular context, but mentors across different contexts. I needed mentors who understood academia. I needed mentors who understood corporate America. I need mentors who understand publishing. I need mentors who understand classroom practice. I need, mentors that actually help me think about making community connections within the university that has nothing to do with academia. Like, where are the Black women at? Where are they? Who do I need to talk to? Who do I need to be friends with? Those kinds of things. And so finding those
Mm,
mentors are really important, and making sure that you are able to connect with those mentors and actually, I don't want to say use those mentors, but work with those mentors as they serve you. But also, I know this sounds strange, but don't be able to afraid to let go of a mentor that stops
mm,
serving you. Like, because I feel like a lot of times,
yeah.
especially as Black women, if we meet another Black woman and we connect with them, we feel like, okay, this person is, I got to hold on to them. I got to hold on to them. I got to hold on to them. And, you might hold on to them in a personal space, but not a professional space anymore, or vice versa. So figuring out what you need as a person,
Mm,
as an academic, and understanding that academia is not you. It's a job. It's a job just like any other job. And I think academics go into academia and that becomes their entire being. I'm an academic. Like, no, I'm Natasha. My academia is a job. I will close my email. I will say no. I will take a break from publishing if I need to because it's a job and I refuse to let a job extract all of me. And so I guess
mm.
if that was my parting thoughts, find those mentors that will help you be your whole self, whether it's multiple mentors across contexts, one or two mentors, and then keep in touch with what you need and adjust accordingly.
Yes, I love that. And that advice, I think, is so relevant, not just for people in academia, not just for young people, but very much for those of us on the corporate America side of things and our profit side of things. And I think so important in all of that you've said, because everybody's like, find a mentor, get a mentor, keep a mentor. But being okay with letting a mentor go, which doesn't mean letting the relationship go,
Right.
but being mindful of like when you have, fulfilled sort of the need of how they were going to service you and support you in that time.
Absolutely.
Because we do need different mentors for different things at different times in our life. So I love that. And I want to say thank you, Dr. Natasha Jones. You have been such a delight and pleasure to have on the show. I'm so thankful that you said yes. And it's always great to just reconnect and hear pieces and parts of, folks who I've known for forever. Still hear pieces and parts of the story that I didn't know,
Mhm.
but also so important and impactful for others to hear as well. So thank you for bringing your whole self to this show today.
Thank you so much for having me. And it's so great to see your face. Great connect with my oldest friend. And I really just appreciated the time to chat with you. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Hustle, Grind, Shine, and Reignite. If you like this episode, like, subscribe, and share on all your favorite podcast platforms. I hope you'll tune in to the next episode featuring another amazing and talented professional of color. In the meantime, shine bright always. Welcome to the Hustle, Grind, Shine, and Reignite podcast. I'm your host, Jessica Hartley. Join me on another journey with amazing